Have you ever wondered about the habits and routines of successful entrepreneurs and how they could apply to your own life? If so, then this episode is for you. Today, I have the privilege of sitting with a successful entrepreneur, founder and CEO of the Unconventional CA, here to help us explore the habits and routines that drive success and how they can apply to everyday life. Present to you Hiten Keshav. Hiten, welcome to Echoes of Eternity.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Looking forward to our conversation on this.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, this is amazing. We've chatted a bit now offline actually before we started this recording, and I just mentioned to you that I've already learned so much. So I'm really excited. Thank you for coming through. You've recently revamped your company's website, the Unconventional CA. But just before that, I managed to, catch a little bit of your story. But I always say there's only so many words, you can put on a website that tells your story. So if you don't mind, would you share, just your journey of how you came to be, the Unconventional CA, and what made you wake up one day and say, this is how I'm going to make an impact, right? And just if you can share, if you're willing to share the banana box story. I think that's what is the story on your website before it got revamped. You mentioned something about a banana box. I don't want to elaborate too much, but yeah, if you could share, that story as well with us, I think it's going to give us so much perspective and context to the conversation that will unfold in the rest of this episode.
No, certainly. So thanks, firstly, and yes, happy to share the journey. It's only intended for good purpose. I share those nuggets, especially that banana box elements, really to inspire people who come from a deemed disadvantaged background and feel that they can't attain what modern society people get today. And so my upbringing comes from a small town in the Eastern Cape. Many people don't even know this place, King Williamstown. I grew up there. My dad was a traditional Indian tradesman, started a corner shop. He had his hands tried in different things multiple times. Our journey went from Johannesburg to Cape Town, finally to King Williamstown, where he was called up by family just to start up a business. So he didn't have wealth or anything given to him. He lost his dad at the age of 7, so he had no fatherly figure to guide and help him as he grew up in his childhood. And similarly, he then, when they had kids, I was the eldest in the family. He had to look after me, but he had to create a future for his family at the same time. And so how that actually ended up with the banana box story was my grandmother looked after me as a kid, a baby, and she used to be behind the shop counter serving customers, and there was nowhere else to put me in play. I couldn't go to a creche, they couldn't afford it at the time, so they kept me there, and I ended up sleeping and growing up in that aspect. And the reason the story comes to life for those out there is, it's not where you start that matters most. It's where you finish and how you choose to finish along that journey that matters more importantly. And there's always two perceptions to life. I always tell people you can either have a glass half full or half empty, and how you choose to view and perceive things is ultimately in your own control. And also how that is influenced is by the people you choose to surround yourself with. Very critical in that, and that comes to my journey as growing up. I grew up, studied in school, went to varsity, and I naturally initially only wanted to become a doctor to help people. It was already engraved in my blood to just give back to people. I couldn't get the opportunity to be a doctor. So I was good at finances. My mom said, listen, why don't you just go and become an accountant and see where that journey takes you. So I took it and I embraced it. And I actually have no regrets on that to this date, because the journey it's allowed me to get to with Unconventional CA today wouldn't have come to life had it not been for that moment. But in that journey, pivotally, I qualified as a CA in 2012. And I wanted to go into business because I had seen what my dad had done from a young age, having in my holiday time from school, I worked in the shop with him. I lifted rice. I got into his warehouse. I saw him start from a small corner shop to a manufacturing facility that packaged and wholesaled and distributed the rice to around the whole of Eastern Cape in a matter of 20 odd years. He managed to achieve that. And I said, hey, my dad's got this. He started from nothing. Why can't I do the same and make him proud? Little did I realize that the way business is run in the context of a traditional corner shop and that evolves is very different to when you want to get into corporate. And I wanted to get into solar and renewable energy. And how that came about was when I was doing my articles in my final year, a client of mine had planted the seed in my mind to say, this is up and coming in the industry and trend. Don't you want to jump onto the bandwagon and be involved in this venture? So I said, I've got nothing to lose. Why not give it a go? And I knew I didn't want to be in corporate. I didn't want to sit in the auditing field. It just didn't inspire me. I couldn't get any form of growth in myself mentally. And so I said, hey, let's just give this a go. I always wanted to do it. Parents twitched their eyes and that, but I'm grateful that they said to me, listen, if you want to give it a go, give it a go. Just be mindful of A, B, and C, and be cognizant that try and generate some form of income while you're trying to build this in parallel so that you don't kill yourself. I tried to do both at the same time, and it was very difficult because why? I came straight out of articles. No network, firstly. Relationships in a small community, very critical if you're wanting to get into business. And I wouldn't even say in a small community, anything. Whether you're in a big city or not, how you build your network is the quickest way to get into market, and I didn't do that. My time and effort that I put in during my articles period, when I had spare time, was sitting playing PlayStation with my friends, drinking, having push-ups and those things. Yet, in the back of my mind, my goal was always to get out of it and be a businessman. So my habits and my behaviors didn't underline my future me in the present moment. And so, ultimately in 2015, all my savings from articles had gone down the drain. I had to start from scratch, literally. And I did not allow anyone to bail me out because I said, if I do that, I won't learn my lesson. So I literally came to Johannesburg with less than $1,000 in my pocket. My friend housed me for 6 months until I found a position that I could work in and a sustainable job. And I was a CFO for a tech startup for about 6 years. And at the pinnacle of my career as in that tech startup, in 2019, I got a few national nominations for SAICA's Top 35, Under 35, and 2 others. I just took a step back internally to say to myself, so how many small businesses in this country go through the problem that I went through, don't have a safety net to rely on from an educational perspective to find a job, to get out of it, and how can I help and serve them so that they don't go through the same shenanigans I went through at my life stage. And that's how I gave birth to Unconventional CA. At the time, it was called The Unconventional CA because it was a personal brand. I really just did this out of my own good heart and will as an individual to give back to small businesses. 3 things that we really wanted to do. One was open up my network, give them opportunity to financing or procurement so that they could get business. And last but not least, just share the experience and knowledge of what one has gone through so that they don't do the same thing. And through that period in 2019 and 2020, just before, into COVID, we did a lot of pro bono work for corporates. And in 2021, our breakthrough came in where we got our pilot program to be launched in the space with a corporate momentum and UKZN. And ever since then, it's I've never looked back. So to date, what I had gone through from a personal perspective, I now live and breathe to help other entrepreneurs not go through that.
I think that's like so inspiring even for me. I mean, thank you so much for sharing that journey. I mean, there is something I want to highlight because I think you've said it, so beautifully, and we hear it often, but you've extended it. So I'm going to repeat it. So people often say it's not where you start, it's where you finish. But it's so profound that you say it's how you choose to finish. I think that's so, so, so important. So I'm making a personal note for me. That's why I'm just repeating it back. So that is pretty cool. But even like your whole journey, I mean, you've touched on like networking, and I also love the fact that you took your own experiences and in some way tried to bundle that and say, okay, I've gone through this. I think I figured it out. How can I now use that experience to help others, which is amazing. And maybe we can get into my next question because it leads on so nicely because you've touched on some of it. From your perspective, what would you say are the handful of, we call it, key habits, right, that you can attribute to your success?
I would certainly, if you're looking at key habits that attribute to anyone's success as an entrepreneur or an individual itself, it's got to boil down to self-mastery. Now, self-mastery for me is a variety of things. Health, your mental well-being is very important. How you utilize your time is essential. The relationships that you build with people, they need to be authentic and valuable at the same time to you and to the individual at the end of the day. And last but not least is, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to understand finances at the end of the day. You can't go into it blindfoldedly. And you've got to make calculated decisions. They always say the higher the risk, the higher the reward, right? And to an extent, yes, that is true, but it's not always the case. You need to make calculated risks that allow you to drive what you're wanting to achieve, but you know that it's not going to create stress for you at the end of the day. And that is pivotal when it comes to business as an entrepreneur. When you have a purpose and a core inner willingness to make something work, when the clouds and the rain thunderstorms come, you won't want to shut your doors and say, it's time to give up. Why? Because there's a purpose and a drive internally that's fueling you to want to succeed. And entrepreneurship is always going to be a roller coaster ride. There's going to be high moments and then there's going to be those down moments. And it's those down moments that test you when you bring your self-mastery into play itself. So again, just to summarize back to your point, what are the key habits that are critical for you to succeed? I would always say to guys, if you are currently either in working or you're wanting to start a side hustle or you want to get into entrepreneurship, time is in your own control. Be very deliberate about how you set up your workspace so that it can be as autonomous as possible, in a way that you can be able to deliver everything satisfactorily to your employer so that it frees up your time. Second to that, utilize your time after hours to be who the future you is. So in my case, as an example, when I was in articles, I wanted to get out and be in business, but I spent half of my time afterwards, free time, not going and studying into investments, not learning about business and what's going on in the industry. I rather spent it with time with drinking and messing around. And it's okay if you do that, but you have to realize that there's consequences at the end of the day. And I'm not saying that you have to spend all your time doing that, but be deliberate and meaningful to say yes to the right things and no to the wrong things. When it comes to that there. The other element is start to associate yourself with people who have been down a journey that you aspire to be. Why? You learn from them very quickly in terms of what they've done right and what they've done wrong. And that'll help you identify what are the tools and the strategies that allow them to succeed in that mind. To make money and wealth, there's a science to it. Anyone can do it, you just have to put the work and the effort to it. Some points, yes, are determined by luck, but I always say luck is met where opportunity is treated with the effort. And so if you treat that collectively, you can turn luck into, hey, I put the work and effort, I deserve it. And it's not just someone handing me something itself there. And then last but not least, I think your own health is very critical to look after, because if you don't look after the engine room here, you can't look after any other engine room.
No, I think, thank you for summarizing that so well, actually. You've touched on a lot. I think the time management aspect is also quite critical, like you're saying, especially if you are not in a position to only pursue, let's call it your purpose, right? Maybe you're in corporate right now, but you want to start up something. Time management becomes so crucial and it can be quite challenging. And even if you're not, and even if you are pursuing, your startup, sometimes it can become difficult to manage your time because you're so determined to make it successful, you forget about the boundaries that you need to sometimes draw to take care of your health, like you're mentioning, right? So that's quite critical, and we'll come back to the well-being and taking care of yourself. Something else I want us to maybe just explore a bit, because you've mentioned it now twice, and I think it's so important, yet it can be quite challenging for so many people because they don't teach you this at school, is networking, right? And you've mentioned the importance of relationships, but not relationships for the sake of just having, thousands of people that you know. It needs to be authentic. If you could just share like just one or two, tricks or shortcuts, or what is the starting point to networking, especially for someone that is new to, let's call it the world, right? Because they all the stuff you've mentioned, they don't teach it to you at school. They don't teach you to take care of your health, your mental well-being, time management. You've almost got to learn this yourself or associate with the right people. If you don't even know who to associate with, I mean, this journey can be almost impossible.
It's a good question, especially for people, to your point, that either introverted or not, can't afford to be in a place where there's a lot of people. How do you do that? And I think in this day and era, the power of social media plays a pivotal role in anyone's life and journey. How you choose to use and absorb social media can either make you or break you. And I look at it in twofold. My journey itself, being an introvert by nature, when I moved to Joburg, I had nothing to start with, and I had to find my way. And I just reflected back and I asked myself, why is it that there's so many CAs out there that are successful and are able to be comfortable, and why is it that I'm scratching around and I can't make do and be a success? And how I then decided to go revert into social media was through two things: YouTube and just podcasts. And there were two people that helped change my life. Firstly, Tony Robbins, and then Joey Dispenza. And Joey Dispenza, I'll explain to you from a health perspective how that also changed. But to the question that you're asking is, if you don't know where to start, social media is the place to go. There are so many influencers out there and really authentic guys that you can follow, that can help inspire and change you. So I would recommend, guy, if you don't know anyone, start with Tony Robbins. That guy is a lifesaver. He's a God-sent angel to this world. If you're looking at some trying to make financial wealth and change for yourself, Grant Cardone is a good guy also. There's a guy called Pedros Koulian. If you're trying to get into business and sales and you're wanting to understand sales tips and that, there's a guy called Andy Elliott. He's very good and powerful. If you're looking at time management elements and that, there's a guy called Craig Ballantyne. He's very good, very powerful, gives you good advice in terms of structuring your day and being very deliberate about time management on that end. If you're a female and you're wanting to get into more similar vibes that are female influencers, Mel Robbins, very powerful influencer and woman that can help shape your perspective on things. Then there's a guy called John Maxwell. He's very good when it comes to inspiration and spiritual parts, but also in terms of leadership as an individual and how you should be treating yourself. And then Jim Rohn. So those are some of the key guys you can just do on social media. If it is in a space where, okay, you can get to networking events and that, but you feel, hey, I'm introverted and I don't know what to do in this space and that, I always recommend just try and pitch up earlier, 15 minutes by at least earlier, because then when feet come into the door, it's easier to start a meet and greet discussion with someone, versus if you come late and there's already a circle and pods, and for you to break into that, it's a bit difficult for people to who are introverted to get into that viewpoint. Then I would also recommend is just try and build your social skill set in terms of understanding the basic dynamics of questions and how you can continue conversations. So books to read: How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and then Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And Chris Voss is an ex-FBI agent, and there's certain key techniques and tips that can keep a conversation going when you're in public with people. And some of the tips that he gives are open, calibrated questions. So always start a question with what, how, where, why, because then it forces the other person to answer, and then it allows you to then rethink the next question itself. Also, in order to build a network and influence, it's not about always doing the talking. It's about listening, more importantly, and asking the right questions for the other person to continue speaking. And when you're in a networking and you're trying to build relationships with people, the more you butter the other person up, the better it becomes on that end, because they feel, hey, this guy is actually engaged in wanting to hear my side of it. And that's, simple things like that can help you build quickly on that end. And last but not least, if you're wanting to get into the professional world, just spend some time on LinkedIn. I'll always encourage people, if you're getting in the professional world and you're more into a B2B focused environment or wanting to tap into that, LinkedIn is your saving grace for that.
I mean, Etienne's dropping like the gems here for us. Like really, like these are so like it's amazing, because I think for myself I've just learned so much, and I like the fact that you mentioned all these people on social media. Well, let's call them like celebrities, because they're so popular, and that's can be such a good starting point, right? Where you don't have to feel overwhelmed, like I need to attend this networking event to get to meet people or to learn from people, but you can start on social media. And I never thought about using social media from that perspective. It's so easy, especially as a young person, to get caught up. You go on social media and you see people, whether they're the right people or the wrong people is up for you to decide, but you start thinking, I need to be like that, but you forget those people that you mentioned, that like I think you mentioned 10 people, whatever. That set of people is probably all you need, right, to start at least questioning, what do I want to do and who do I want to be, and start giving yourself direction. And it comes back to what you said at the beginning as well, about you wanting to be a doctor, go into the medical profession, but then pursuing the CA path, but embracing it. And that's something as well. I feel like everything happens for a reason, and it might not always come easy, but if you learn to embrace the path, whether it turns out to be successful or not, there's always something that you would have learned from it.
Yeah, right? Certainly, definitely. I boil it down to, there's a spiritual power beyond us that we don't see, that has a plan for you, and you've got to trust the process along that path there. If you're going to keep fighting it, it's just going to create frustration. Whereas if you start to embrace it and say, okay, what can be learned and taken out of this, and start to evolve in that way, you'll then see the pieces of the puzzle fit together. And sometimes it's not always immediate, and the patience game is very critical in anything that you go through in life, whether as a businessman or as an individual on a day-to-day basis. It's just important to understand that there is a trusted process put in place for you. As long as you have put all the work and effort and it hasn't worked out, there's no reason for you to be hard on yourself, because there's no fallback to say, I could have done X better, I could have done Y better. And as long as you don't give yourself those reasons, then the universe has got a better plan for you. You just got to trust that plan.
No, I think that's so important to highlight as well, because it's something that people might know about, but it's difficult to put into practice, right? Trusting the process. Maybe I can ask you this question: how do you know that you've done enough to then trust the process that follows?
I think it comes to you naturally. You as an individual will know if you're going to bullshit yourself, you're just going to get bullshit outcomes in life. So if you're going to lie to yourself that, as an example, let's just say that you're chasing a property, right? And you're wanting to go and buy this property. Now you've gone and done all your homework, you've met the property, you've put in the effort, you've checked everything. And the answer comes back and the seller says, listen, I don't want this. I'm not willing to sell. you can't say to yourself now that, hey, I could have done better, or I could have put in a higher offer, etc. Especially if your offer that you had put in, you had deliberated and done your research market wise to say, hey, this is a reasonable offer, all the economic situations, I believe this is fair. Then it's a win. You can't say then in that case, listen, there's higher power out there saying this thing is not meant for you itself. So I think it's your internal conscious that will tell you, and that's where your spiritual being comes out as a human being to say, hey, am I lying to myself or not? And the worst thing you can ever do in life is lie to your own self, because you're just leading yourself down a wrong path then. So there's no silver bullet to it, but your consciousness will tell you that.
Yeah, so I mean, no, thanks. And I think, again, it speaks to, people struggle a lot with this concept of purpose as well, right? And everybody's searching for their purpose. But it's so easy to forget exactly what you've touched on, and that's trusting yourself. If something doesn't feel right, so, I mean, don't lie to yourself about it, right? Don't pursue it because someone else says that's your purpose, or, you think it's what your purpose should be. So maybe if I can phrase a question this way, because it touches on everything we've just spoken about, what does success actually then come down to, at least for you, because it's personal for everyone? How do you define success for yourself?
So I think for me, success boils down to my happiness at the end of it all. And for me, happiness is a few things. Mentally, am I in a good space? I don't want to be living stressful and chasing my tail like a hamster on a wheel. Financially, very important, because finances play a critical role and give you a certain element of freedom that allows you to live your life comfortably. And I encourage everyone to drive to build financial wealth for themselves, because it can allow you a different form of growth and sustainability on that end. But it's your personal choice at the end of the day. Family, very critical. Must have a balanced family life. And most importantly for me, spirituality. I need to be in a space that I feel I'm giving back, and I can connect with the higher self for me. And that boils down to just my own value systems and what life has taught me, and what it brings out. So that is success in my journey. The ultimate goal and the aim is to leave this world in a better place, whether it's as an iconic influencer or whatever that may be, but to inspire other people to know that, hey, whether you're in the rubbish bin, it doesn't mean that you have to stay there. You've got a choice, and your choice is determined by what you control with your thoughts and how you choose to think and feel. And so that you start taking control of will help you evolve going forward.
It's brilliant. It comes back again, right? How you choose to finish, and you've got certain elements in your control, and even tools, right? Social media is a tool, LinkedIn is a tool. All these books that you mentioned, it's all tools, and you've got all that at your disposal, and you've got to make that conscious decision and choice to use those tools, right? And maybe that leads me to my next question. And so many people talk about a morning routine, but I want to shift the conversation towards a self-care routine, right? I mean, it doesn't matter when you do it. So moving away from what is your morning routine to what is your self-care routine. I wish people would talk about that a lot more. I don't know if you've got one yet, but what would it look like? Because you've mentioned a few times, and you've said it's also part of your values, right? Like your mental well-being and your health. Even financial stability or financial freedom is part of well-being to an extent. What does that routine look like for you, that self-care routine, if you've got one? Or
So self-care routine, yeah, I actually like the fact that you don't call it a morning routine, and there's a reason for that in my own experience. What I've seen in the space where I've worked with other people, and is that not everyone is a morning bird. And you can't force someone to be a morning bird at the same time. Yes, there are benefits to it, scientifically, etc. But not everyone is wired in that regard. And I have seen some very successful people that have no morning routine itself. And the way you've pivoted to a self-care routine, I think, is actually the better word that society needs to start embracing. And so in my context, what's a self-care routine for me is I don't negotiate on my health. So I'm in the gym daily for 45 minutes to about an hour. at least 4 times a week. I meditate and I practice breathing before I start my day. It's a non-negotiable routine for me. I have to connect with spiritual side of me. I just don't feel my day is fulfilled if I don't do that. The breathing helps me from a relaxation perspective in terms of calming my nervous system and getting me set for my day. And I do that twice a day. I do it before I start my day, and I do it as I come home. The first thing I'm at is spirituality and just to de-stress and release myself. That is crucial. I have a weekly schedule from a time planning perspective. So, for example, my entire week going forward is been prepared for the next 7 to 14 days. There are some few slots in that I would allow for emergencies, but non-negotiables. In that there, in my daily routine when I'm in the workspace itself, I don't try and chase my tail. So I have certain closed off slots that are clear for focus time. And that day I don't look and disturb myself with things like my phone and emails, etc. So I'm more really focused on being clinical on that end. With that, in a week schedule, I have dedicated time for family, and I make it very deliberate in that, especially as an entrepreneur. If you don't have a balanced lifestyle, and if you have kids or you have a wife or you're just getting into a relationship, to find a balance between how you're trying to grow your future versus, okay, you've got responsibilities at the end, can be very daunting and difficult, and can really result in very tense or sometimes conversations that get ugly. And so you've got to manage both. And many people, I used to be this culprit of this. I used to throw the victim mindset to say, no, I'm building a future, so I don't have time for this. And when I read about Craig Ballantyne, how he said to me, just be really deliberate with your time, I started to block off things to change the way my relationship ended up with my wife. And so those are the basics that I don't negotiate on at any given stage when it comes to my own self-care routine.
It's just interesting how you prioritize it. And I say that because I feel, and I could be very wrong about this, but I feel like, especially these days, everyone knows about mental well-being, and they've got the set of values, right, that they know about it. But it gets thrown out the window to some extent very easily. And I like that you're saying, like you mentioned the word non-negotiable a few times. And it's so important, like even just the way you manage your time. And I want to come back to something on that. But even like you mentioned, the breathing, right? So we've had someone on the podcast talk about breathing and stuff briefly. But the fact that you say you do it twice a day is incredible, because for myself, I usually do it in the evening before I go to bed. But I never thought about, because lots of people also talk about starting your day with, some sort of meditation or breathing exercise, whatever that may be, and you start your day off that way. But I like that you say when you come home, just like the first thing you do, whatever, is go through your breathing exercises or your routine, just to de-stress and to almost come back to the present. You're now at home, and you've got your family time ahead of you, and yeah. So you've shared like so many nuggets there, even blocking out focus time in your diary. So yes, all of this applies definitely to people that are in the entrepreneurship game. But even if you incorporate, I feel like all these, let's call them rules, right, apply. Maybe they're a bit more difficult to execute, but again, then it comes back to priority and how important is your own mental well-being and just general well-being.
And I think there, to your point, where it can feel daunting, well, the simplest question someone needs to just ask themselves is, am I making an excuse to find a way out of this, or am I finding a solution? And that's what you have to ask yourself when something is as important to you. If it's non-negotiable, at the end of the day, you will find a solution. If it's not a non-negotiable, you will fall for the excuse. Simple as that when it comes to thinking through things. And it boils down again to you internally. Why is this important to happen? So in the case of from a mental well-being perspective, the reason I don't negotiate on my mental well-being is I'm an ex-epileptic. So I was diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 9, and until the age of 28, I had been, well, I'd say till the age of 32, I had been consistently on medication. But at the age of 28, when I got introduced to spirituality and when I started following Joey Dispenza, I realized that what we have in our control from a mind perspective in our brain can affect how we feel physically in our body. And as you train your mind and your brain to think in a different pattern, you start to release chemicals and hormones in your body that relay a different response to your nervous system. So, being an epileptic who had once had to potentially have a piece of his brain removed, I, by 2019, had been off medication fully. So over a period of 4 years, I'd gradually taken my medication doses to a lower level, and I had just focused on a future me, practiced the breathing exercises and the meditation element, and that for me drives me every day because I don't want to ever go back to have to experience what I had, because I know the curtailing effect it had on my family, and I know what it had on me as an individual when I had to be out and knowing that there's other individuals that are concerned about my own health. So those are critical things that I just say to people whenever you look at wanting to do something. What is that driving force that's not going to make you go back to finding an excuse?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think you mentioned building your future self, and you said it in the beginning as well, maybe a bit differently, but this idea of building your future self, I think that concept is incredibly profound, and it can be a starting point for so much. Again, like you're saying, am I looking for a solution or an excuse? It can come back to the question of, is this aligned with my future self that I'm trying to build or not, right? And hopefully that resonates with people. It certainly does with me, and I think it's going to shift so much for myself as well. So like, I really appreciate you sharing this with us. Something I want to ask you, because we've touched on it in terms of time management, and you've mentioned blocking out focus time. Having a to-do list, right, is something that just came to my mind. Like you also mentioned, you plan the next week, 2 weeks ahead, leaving some slots open for emergencies, etc. For some people, having a to-do list can be very overwhelming. If you could share your thoughts on creating a to-do list. Is it necessary? Because again, like you mentioned, people are wired differently. Some people are spontaneous. Okay, I wake up today, this is what I need to do. Other people, like myself, I do what you do, right? I need to plan the whole week ahead. My week is planned. Just your thoughts on the to-do list, and again, maybe in terms of flexibility again, because now you've planned this whole thing out. If something comes up, how rigid are you to do that schedule, stuff like that?
What I find a to-do list does is it holds you accountable to certain things. So I use a to-do list. I use an app called Todoist. And the reason I use it is, for me, there's two things. On the spur moment, something can come up to say that needs to be done. What you can do is you can add it onto that list of things when the date needs to be done. Just categorize it as to whether it, and I would suggest people, if you're going to use it, use the Eisenhower matrix model to determine whether it's important and urgent, important, not urgent, not important, not urgent, urgent but not important. You classify it there, and that will determine where, what things you need to now start focusing on. You obviously want to focus on everything that's important and urgent, because that's where it is. Then you focus on things where you can delegate or otherwise just ignore. That's the whole principle of having a to-do list. But going back to it, and the flexibility, from a brain perspective or just from a functional perspective, if things are given to you and you have to now remember it, you're eating up energy into your head, and that can consume you, and you can become very drained at the end of the day. Use it as a mechanism just to brain dump, to say these are all of the things that need to be done. And I think this is also where it comes to your own leadership, and when you have to learn to say yes to something or no to something. And if you have that framework to say under which bucket does it fall under, you can then easily say, okay, this is something emergency, I've got to get into it now, let me get it done. No, it can be done in the next 24 to 48 hours. It's on tomorrow's list of things to focus on. And that's how I would say people, if you use it, it allows you to become a lot more efficient and productive with your time. And it also holds you honest and accountable to whether you're getting things done that are important for your future you.
No, I think that's really good advice. Yeah, so thanks for that. And then I want to come back. You shared your journey of epilepsy and stuff, and you mentioned the power of your mind and your thoughts. Maybe as you're wrapping this up, because you've spoken about, I feel like, so much practical advice. You've given us so much, even in terms of other role models we can go and mirror almost, and books to read, and this app you've mentioned for time management and the to-do list. So in closing, right, if I wanted to, let's say, put all this into practice, right, all these habits and routines, it can be quite daunting and overwhelming, because you might be in a position today where you feel like, oof, there's like this and this and this that Hitian's mentioned, and we've discussed. I don't know where to start. It's too much, and then you just forget about it. What would be like the most, just let's call it one thing, right, that I can start doing today to put me on this path of just giving myself better direction and purpose, and incorporating all these things eventually into your daily life?
I think there's probably two things that I would start. The first thing is time management. Just make sure that that's just under your control. No one else controls your time. We all have 24 hours in a day. How you choose to spend it and use it is up to you, not up to me. So that's in your own control. You get that right, and you start to prioritize what's important and going to bring what you want from a happiness and a success perspective for you in your own definition. Then you can start to utilize your time towards that effectively. And then the second thing is just find a mentor or get coaching. People who can guide you and help you along this journey, because then you can start to prioritize and phase things in. To your point, it may sound like an overload, but what's important to you may not be important to another person. So you've got to say, okay, I'm going to start incorporating these things immediately, because these are the low-hanging fruits that are going to bring the quickest result for me right now. And I always recommend everything be done in phases, rather than not everyone is wired to do everything one go. So and be kind to yourself along the process. Accept that you might drop the ball now and then. Make sure when you drop the ball that you are mindful that you've dropped the ball, but that you learn from it, and so you don't repeat it again.
Yeah, it comes. So yeah, I'd like to then add, maybe as a third one, it's again the power of your mind, right, and your thoughts. It's very easy to, like you're saying, okay, I might incorporate time management and all of these other things, and then you drop the ball, and then it's very easy to say it's too difficult and I can't do it, and again you can get caught in that cycle. So the power of your mind is pretty important as well.
There's a big role into it. Everything is in your control there, in the mind and the thoughts. So that box and engine room that sits between your two ears, you have ultimate control of it. Whether it's from a spirituality perspective, which is taught in our culture. You follow any of the spiritual leaders, BK Shivani, Sadhguru, Shiv Yoga, Art of Living. They all talk about having control of your mind and having that power aspect sorted out. In the Western culture, scientifically, guys like Joey Dispenza speak about it. There's a few other influencers that I'm just trying to think of the one name that comes to my mind, and it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think. John Assaraf. He's another guy who speaks about the power of your mind. So it's proven with science, and in the Indian culture we speak about it from a spiritual perspective. It's known to you. It's in your control. Start taking control of it, and you'll start to have the results that you want. Don't let the situation dictate your emotion. Ultimately, is the thing that you have to remember.
Yeah, I think we could probably have a whole conversation on that element, and I like that you said it's not let's call it an Eastern culture thing only. It's discussed in the Western cultures as well, just from a scientific perspective. You could probably unpack that and have a whole conversation on controlling the mind and how important it is. But thank you for raising it. Hopefully it just sparks the curiosity for so many people out there. Hitian, I want to thank you so much for sharing all these, honestly, like golden nuggets you've dropped. And I just want to mention to everyone listening, because on your website, which I'm going to leave the link obviously in the description of this video and this podcast. There's tons of free resources that you share as well, so definitely going to put that in there for everyone to check out. But thank you for coming through and sharing. I had really awesome time.
It was a pleasure chatting with you as well. It was lovely, and thank you for allowing me just to share the journey. I hope many people who listen to it get the inspiration that I intend to set out for others and learn from it and help them move forward in their life. So thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks, Etienne.